What's up, everybody? It's Casey Johnson. We are back with another edition of the Fast Break. We are presented by Dunkin' Donuts. And the Bulls are on a 4-game losing streak. Yikes. Against a very favorable schedule to boot. So what can the Bulls do to turn their fortunes around? Well, here are 4 things I'm going to be checking out this week. Number 1, home cooking. This was an issue last season. The Bulls won just 18 games at the United Center last season, obviously finishing 18-23. They were better on the road than at home last season, which is very hard to do, 21-20 away from the United Center. They've already flipped that script this season. They're off to a 6-2 start at the United Center, a third of the way to their home victory total from last season. And man, do they need to continue that good home play, because they are stuck in a rut with that 4-game losing streak. They've got an opportunity against back-to-back 4-win teams, the Nets on Wednesday, and on Friday, the Indiana Pacers, whom the Bulls owe with that last-second loss in Indiana with that Pascal Siakam jumper over 𝗵𝗵 and Trey Jones. And then the week concludes with the Warriors, who are actually coming to the United Center with a tough back-to-back, playing Saturday night in Cleveland. Steph Curry has been out of the lineup. He's going to be reevaluated later this week, so it's actually unlikely and mildly unfortunate if he's not able to play in his lone trip to the United Center. Always love seeing greatness in person, and who doesn't like to see Steph Curry play basketball? But that's off the point. The point is the Bulls need to change their ways with continuing their strong play at the United Center. I've asked players and coaches what the difference is this year with the home record versus the road record. They're obviously struggling on the road this season. They've had no good answers other than the fact that they say they just obviously have been more connected defensively at home. And look, 𝗵𝗫 has been sounding off about wanting to create a home court advantage for multiple seasons. They're finally doing that in the early stages of the season, and that's gonna need to continue this week with the Bulls on that 4-game skid going into Wednesday's game against the Brooklyn Nets. Bulls have struggled, obviously, this season against teams that don't have a lot of victories. Losing to the New Orleans Pelicans, Charlotte Hornets, and Indiana Pacers in succession on the road last week. So time to change that with that home back-to-back, not even a back-to-back, consecutive home games against 4-win teams, the Brooklyn Nets and the Indiana Pacers. All right, second thing I'm going to be looking for this week, the rotation. It is majorly in flux. We are not here to make excuses for the Bulls, but with Kevin Huerter going down in Orlando with a groin situation, the Bulls were out 7 players. That's why you saw Lachlan Olbrich and Emmanuel Miller make back-to-back appearances in Indiana and Orlando. These are 2-way players. They're not expected to play this season, and here they are. Not a lot of teams are going to win with 7 players out. Let's just cut to the chase. The Bulls' depth has been kind of one of their main calling cards for their early season success. And when you're down 7 players, that depth is severely tested. The Bulls' formula for success earlier in the season was to wear opponents down with their style of play and coming at opponents wave after wave with fresh bodies, going 10, sometimes 11 players deep. Billy Donovan has not been able to do that of late. Again, we're not here to make excuses, but we're here to talk about some concerning injury situations. Isaac Okoro, who originally was considered a short-term situation, has now been out for multiple games. And, we have not heard any real semblance of his timeline for return. That's number 1. Number 2, and more pressing, is Coby White developing some tightness in his left calf. This is not the same calf that sidelined him from that August injury into the regular season, which was obviously a significant situation. This originally was termed as an overabundance of caution when it developed on Monday in Orlando. But look, I'm not a doctor, but I'm just going to guess, is that an overcompensation from the right calf that's now spreading to the left calf? And we all know how all players throughout the league now treat calf injuries. You don't want anything leading to a more tenuous or difficult situation with the Achilles. So look, the Bulls are going to be conservative with Coby White and his calf situation. I don't know if he's going to be out 1 game. He's already missed 2. 1 game more, 2 games more, a week more, 2 weeks more. He was due for some imaging today. on Tuesday, the day we're taping this Fast Break episode. In the short term, expect him to be out for a little bit, and 𝗏𝗏 and Trey Jones have both been playing very well of late, so they can, on the short term, probably hold down the fort, but long term for the Bulls to achieve any kind of success, Coby White needs to be 100% at his best, both physically and mentally. So again, the Bulls' injury situation has created different rotations. It, to me, has led to some of their defensive issues. Obviously, 𝗦𝗏cie 𝗿𝗀𝗀 being out has been another wrinkle to the defensive issues. But there is some good news potentially on the horizon defensively, and that is Zach Collins is scheduled to participate in some G League practices this week. If he comes out of those in good shape, he is expected to make his season debut on the back half of this week, whether that's Friday against the Pacers or Sunday against the Warriors remains to be seen. But we all remember Zach Collins and the level that he was playing at defensively in the preseason. He was offering physicality, rim protection, all the buzzwords you heard from the Bulls in training camp and their desire to change their script defensively. They've obviously, in this losing streak, really struggled with that. I thought they actually played better defensively in Orlando with that tough loss, but late they gave up some crucial offensive rebounds and struggled to contain the ball at the point of attack. They were better at that earlier in the game, and that's where 𝗦𝗏cie 𝗿𝗀𝗀's return will help. As far as the back end, in terms of defensive rebounding and physicality, that's where Zach Collins comes into play. In fact, we all remember he got injured taking a charge from Julius Randle in a preseason game. So he'll bring that physical component and will be a welcome return to the Bulls rotation if and when he is cleared. And but man, 7 players out, that's a lot for any team to withstand. And again, speaks to the Bulls' small margin for error, which Billy Donovan talks about consistently, and we've been seeing on display throughout this 4-game losing streak. The Bulls just need to be on point pretty much at both ends and at full strength to have any chance to win a game. And when you're missing 7 players, that margin of error shrinks even more considerably. All right, my third point is the management timeline. I talked a little bit about this last week. Does it get sped up if the Bulls losing ways continue? There was a pretty splashy ESPN.com story penned by my colleague and buddy Jamal Collier that got a little aggregation happy in terms of people talking about the Bulls having internal trade conversations for Anthony Davis. I mean, let's just pause here for perspective. Of course they're having internal discussions about gauging the feasibility or likelihood of trading for Anthony Davis. That's what management teams do. They survey all opportunities, potential opportunities throughout the league. They have conversations internally all the time. If they're not talking about potentially, weighing the pros and cons of trading for Anthony Davis, they're not doing their jobs, okay? Later in the story, because the headline is what got aggregated, it talked about how the Bulls are not on that timeline to push all their chips in. This is consistent with what the reporting I've talked about many times on this and on our By the Horns podcast. So I personally will be surprised if the Bulls push their chips in for an Anthony Davis this season. But look, if the Bulls continue to struggle at this level, we're taping this in the wake of a 4-game losing streak, does that change management's calculus or thinking? I personally still say no, but it's something to monitor. And that's why this opportunity to try to turn some things around with this homestand is important, because I know for a fact that the Bulls went into the season, management's philosophy was to take the long play, try to be competitive while still developing the young players, and not to speed up the timeline by cashing in assets, etc., to make a big splash. The Bulls took that route in 2021 with the 𝗏𝗏 𝗏𝗀𝗀𝗀 trade, and then obviously doubled down on that with that splashy offseason with DeMar DeRozan, Alex Caruso, Lonzo Ball. They're not on that timeline right now. But if the Bulls continue to lose, do they maybe change their thinking and have more of a sell-off? I personally, right now, do not think that is the plan, but it's something to monitor. And it's why one of the things I'm going to be watching for this week. Can they stop this losing streak with some good home play and kind of keep management on their organizational philosophy timeline that they entered the season with? So something to monitor. And again, I will be, at this point, surprised if they try to trade for Anthony Davis, but that was the aggregated headline from a larger story by J`amal Collier. Very good story, but it also had that headline get aggregated, but that also said the Bulls aren't on that timeline, which is consistent with what I've been saying. All right, lastly, we're going to take a look at some offensive ratings. I'm sorry, not just ratings. We're going to look at some statistics at the 20-game mark. The 20-game mark historically is a time when franchises start kind of looking big picture, kind of where they're at with the season, kind of maybe gauge their approach for the remainder of the season. And I'm still stung from many, many years ago when I still worked for the Chicago Tribune, when I called the 20-game mark the quarter pole. And an old crusty copy editor got very angry with me and said, do you know anything about horse racing? A quarter pole is when there's 20 games left in the season, not 20 games into the season. So don't call this the quarter pole. But the 20-game mark is historically a time in the NBA when a lot of teams kind of take survey of where they are. And here's where the Bulls are on some key stats that I pulled up. All right, after 20 games, they have an offensive rating of 113.4, which ranks 21st. They have a defensive rating of 116.8, which ranks 23rd. They have a net rating of -3.4, which ranks 21st. Pace, they are second in the league at 104.5 possessions. Their assist percentage, very good at 6th. They're at 68.1 assist percentage. Here's some two troubling stats, which is why I checked to look for them. Opponent second chance points, 17.3 per game. That's tied for 27th. And opponent field goals at 5 feet or less, in other words, at the rim. The Bulls are last in the NBA, allowing 36.9 attempts at the rim per game. All right, why do I focus on all these stats? All right, to me, let's focus on the big one, last in the league at opponent shots at the rim. This is going to be, to me, a season-long issue. They are going to struggle with rim protection all season. Zach Collins' return definitely will help in some regard, but the Bulls are largely an undersized team, and they also try to take away the three-point shot. That's going to allow more shots at the rim. But it gets back to what I was talking about before, how small their margin of error is. If you're allowing almost 37 shots at the rim, you're going to probably need to score a lot of points because defensively you're going to be challenged a lot throughout the night. And that's kind of been the recipe for this 4-game losing streak. The assist percentage, 6th in the league. That speaks to their good ball and player movement. They've been very good in that regard all season. Pace is a continuation of last season, 2nd in the league. It speaks to the style of play that they need to win games. They need to wear teams down with quick possessions, lots of possessions, coming at you with waves, 10, 11 player rotation. A big point of emphasis going into the season was opponents having more shots than the Bulls from last season, and the Bulls are actually down again in that regard. So they need to keep kind of trying to wear teams down with that pace game. And 2nd in the league is a good sign. Offensive and defensive rating being stuck in the bottom third of the league, those are both troubling, especially because when the Bulls were winning earlier this season, they were top 10 in defensive rating. They were much more connected to that end. They were, to me, kind of following the blueprint laid out in training camp with the need for more physicality, better ball containment at the point of attack. That's kind of gone by the wayside. Now, the injuries have played a part in that, not only with 𝗦𝗏cie 𝗄𝗏 going out, but all these injuries being widespread has led to different rotations, guys being not as connected. And let's face it, teams are kind of targeting 𝗵𝗏cie 𝗄𝗏 a little bit more, and individually he's struggled a little bit with point of attack. He's been pretty good in the team defensive schemes. So obviously both those ratings need to go up, offensive and defensive rating, if the Bulls want to change their ways. All right. That's going to do it for our storylines. For Banner Bull, I picked Coby White last week. Yikes. Played very well in the 2 games where he played, averaged 24.5 points and 5 assists, but he missed the last 2 games to injury and now has that left calf situation. So I'm going to give myself a fail for my Banner Bull pick of last week. My Banner Bull pick for this week is going to be Josh Giddey. This is a guy who's averaging almost a triple-double and is 3rd in the NBA in assists. And let's get off the statistics for a second and focus on style of play. If you watch Josh Giddey, what is he doing well? Well, a lot. He is attacking the rim very consistently. He's playing at a very high pace, and he is shooting the three ball with authority and confidence without hesitation. He had a deep three late in the Orlando game that was a shot where if he had taken it last season, particularly in the first half of the season, you might have been cringing, kind of wondering what the result was going to be. He knocked it down and just looked completely decisive while doing so. This three-point shooting to me is no longer a mirage, and it speaks to the offseason work he did. It's continuing that heater that he was on in the second half of last season. You now no longer worry about him shooting the three-point shot. So you couple that with his ability to get to the rim with his physicality and his positional size. That's a nice offensive repertoire. One thing I know in talking to Josh Giddey that he wants to improve on is his turnovers. Now, part of this is going to be just due to his usage. He's got the highest usage rate on the Bulls, and the ball's obviously in his hands a lot. But he committed a season-high 8 turnovers in Orlando. That's taken his season average up to 3.6 turnovers per game. That's a career high. So I look for Josh Giddey to change that this week, and that's why he is my banner bull. He's been stuffing the box score almost every night with a double-double at least, and sometimes a triple-double. And he's got 3 great opportunities this week with home games against the Nets, Pacers, and Warriors. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Fast Break. We are presented by Dunkin' Donuts. We always appreciate you checking us out. We'll probably have a mailbag episode next week. It just feels that time, like it's that time. My producer, 𝗏𝗏 just kind of nodded in agreement, I think, off camera. So we'll check you out next week, and we appreciate you tuning in this time.